Hi everyone and welcome to the Uppercent Web3 School, which is a part of the Uppercent University, which is a 4-week program that has just started where you can learn how to become the best version of yourself, learn from Web3 leaders and earn daily crypto rewards at the same time. To learn more about the Uppercent University, visit the link in the description of this video. And also to learn more about how Uppercent is using Web3 technology to revolutionize the e-learning market, visit uppercent.com. Now, without further ado, let's get into episode 2 of the Web3 School, where we will be discussing how to build a Web3 startup with Ken Olling, the CEO of Meld. Ken, firstly, thank you very much for joining me today.
Always good to talk to you, Jake. Thanks for inviting me.
I appreciate that. Other people might have a different way of answering that question, but thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And I think just to give some context to start with, if you could introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Sure, no problem. Ken Olling. I'm originally American. I live in Norway now. I've lived in Europe now for about 23 years. My background is in design, communications, and branding. So I've been working as a designer and as a typographer since 1987. So I began my career doing traditional types of design, and then I got into web design in the mid-90s, and that kind of led me down the path of technology, and I got to be a part of the .com, both the highs and the lows. And then in 2010, I moved from design into strictly technology, where I started a company that was building mobile applications and technology for other people to build mobile applications. So that transitioned to like a more sort of what you'd consider to be kind of a traditional Silicon Valley type of tech startup. And then in 2016, I moved into the world of data and data visualization and video game technology, where I was focusing on using game technology for industry and for environmental change and smart cities and things like that. As part of that process, I somehow got exposed to the banking world. And in 2017, I started working on a financial model for a new type of a bank. And I got a couple of bankers to look at my model, and they decided they wanted to join me. So for 3 years, I tried to create or get a banking license based in Malta. And in 2019, the Maltese government or the Maltese banking system was put on the ECB gray list. So that killed any potential, possibilities for us to get a banking license. And then right about that same time, DeFi in the crypto space started picking up. And after coming from the banking world and seeing all of the, blockers and difficulties and bureaucracy and gatekeepers and everything related to that, and going into DeFi, which was trying to create the same set of like functionality and same set of technologies that the banking world was, but doing it in a strictly crypto environment with no gatekeepers, focusing on technology, focusing on the math behind it as something that you can count on, was very, very attractive. And at that point, it kind of brought all of my experiences together, where you're communicating to big audiences, trying to explain very complex systems in very simple ways. You're working with technology and you're working with finance. You're trying to innovate in the financial space. All these pieces came together kind of almost coincidentally. And that resulted in Meld being born.
Fantastic. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I've never heard you actually explain your full journey, but it all adds up to how you got into Meld. And I suppose that's the next logical question, Ken. What is Meld?
Yeah, so Meld is what the title says it is. It's effectively taking and melding the traditional financial world, which we're all familiar with, dollars and yen and euros and pounds, with the new crypto world, Bitcoin and Ethereum and, all the good things connected to that. And so bringing these two pieces together and effectively crossing the bridge that you're not really allowed to cross today, and being able to travel between these two in a very, very fluid manner. So Meld came out of some conversations and observations that I had with some friends of mine, expats living here. And we would go out to dinner, we'd go out for drinks, and all of my friends, or most of them, had been investing in crypto since 2019, early 2019, after the crash. And so they saw their portfolios massively swell, become huge. So come 2020, mid 2020, these normal people, they have normal jobs, they work 9 to 5 kind of thing, but they were seeing, $5 million portfolios, $7 million portfolios based on very small amounts of money that they'd initially invested in. And we would go out to dinner or we'd go out for drinks, and they couldn't pay for their drinks. They had no money. So they had all of this wealth tied up in crypto, and they could do absolutely nothing with it. And so seeing this, it just became very apparent that there was a problem in the market, or there was an opportunity in the market for a solution to be able to allow people to keep their crypto, to tie it up, lock it up into a smart contract, protect it in a safe way that they feel comfortable with, and then borrow fiat against that value. So it's not creating debt. You're not actually getting a credit card. All you're doing is you're saying, okay, let's say I have $200,000 in whatever, Bitcoin or Ethereum. I don't want to sell it. So you don't want to sell it for two reasons. One, because you bought it because you believe it's going to go up. And the other reason is if you sell it, then you're going to get capital gains tax. There's going to be a tax event, and you're going to lose a huge percentage of that value. So it's a double negative if you want to sell your asset. So rather than sell it, you take it and you say, I'm going to put it here as collateral, and then I'm going to borrow 50% of its value. So I'm going to borrow $100,000. I'm going to put up $200,000 in crypto as collateral. And then what you see is like, if the crypto value is here and the collateral is here, over time, the value of that crypto is going to go up, right? So then you're going to be less and less in a situation where you're borrowing a lot from what you started with. So it's a very old-fashioned method of banking. It's actually the oldest fashioned method of banking. It's called Lombard financing, which is why you see like cities in Europe, old cities in Europe, they have Lombard Street. It's the old word for banking street, where people would take their farm, or they would take whatever they had, their crop, and then they would borrow against the value of that, where they wouldn't actually go into debt. They would just borrow part of that value, and they would be in a relatively safe situation. So we wanted to take these values or these tools and make them available to absolutely everybody. And that was the sort of starting point. And to do that, you have to have the crypto side and you have to have the banking side. And so where we stand today is we have a bank and we have a DeFi protocol that brings these two pieces together.
Brilliant. So I think, yeah, you definitely answered one of the questions I had there about how did the creation of Meld come about, and you kind of just brushed over my next question, which was what are Meld's main products. So maybe you could go into a little bit more depth on the two that you mentioned, the DeFi protocol and the bank.
Yeah, so Meld basically has two products from a rational perspective. You have a DeFi protocol, which is effectively kind of connected to a non-custodial wallet or a smart contract that is out there in the world of blockchain or the world of crypto, which is unregulated, it's unmanaged, it's on the chain. Everybody can see it, everybody can find out about it. And then you have the exact antithesis of that, which is the bank. So you have fiat, which is very closed, which is highly regulated. It's very specific to jurisdictions. And so these two products, while they are extremely different, they're solving the same problem, right? You have cryptocurrency and you have traditional currency. Each of them are trying to capture some degree of value. And then we want to be able to bring these two pieces together. And so while they are very two different products, out of necessity, the idea is that you want to bring them together, you want to meld them together in a way where the user feels very much like they're one product.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And to be honest with you, I always wondered, no one's ever explained to me what the meaning behind the name Meld actually meant. And seeing you multiple times already using the Meld as terminology really, really has hit a few points home. So Yeah, I think that's definitely clear for a lot of people to understand. And I suppose what I'd also like to know is what actually is the goal, like the main goal for Meld? Like, what do you want to accomplish with Meld?
So the goal moves with maturity, right? So when we started Meld in 2021, the goal was to create a lending and borrowing protocol that made it possible for people to, take their crypto, lock it up, and get fiat. And the goal was never, in the very beginning, the goal was never to have a bank. But what we found very quickly after we started was that no banks would have anything to do with us. And it was the biggest risk in everything that we were doing was the bank side. So we had to follow this path and go after a bank. And so in the process of going after the bank, then you see that, and you talk to people and you explain what you're doing, and you realize that the problem is actually bigger than what you had anticipated it was. You thought it was just, people taking crypto and being able to get some value out of it. The bigger problem is people have a very, very difficult time with their banks in general on many, many different levels. And so the initial idea was the lending and borrowing protocol, but now the idea is a much more holistic idea of allowing people to manage their own money, manage their own crypto in the way that they see fit by putting these two components together. So it's expanded, or it's evolved over time, and a lot of that has largely to do with, one, us understanding the market better, and two, us listening to the customer and listening to the people, the listening to what the people in the market are saying that their biggest pain points are.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think anyone that's watching that is creating their own Web3 startup or a startup in any form, right? That point's really important. You have to listen to your market. You have to pivot and build something that's necessary for your audience, right? But yeah, just coming off the back of that. So, what actually is in your eyes the next really important steps in the Meld journey?
At this point, it's all about delivery. We're right at the point now where all the different pieces of the puzzle have come together, where we have the bank side, we have the fiat side or the crypto side. The products have been defined, the technology is being built. Now it's kind of the probably the most gratifying part of the process, which is when you start to see all of this strategy and development and exploration become very, very concrete and turn into a working product. And when it turns into that working product, you get two distinct set of circumstances. One, you get this kind of crash of what you hoped it was going to be and what it really is. And then second, you get this realization that some of the things that you thought were going to be great ended up not being great. And so you go through this kind of creative destruction process when you're building, the product is actually coming together, where you have to sort of look in the mirror and say, okay, well, we put a lot of energy into this, but it wasn't that great of an idea. So we have, or great of feature. So we have to change it to make it good. And then on the other side, you have to say, okay, does this thing actually solve the specific problem that you want to solve? And maybe we intended it to do, but it didn't do it. And so it's that process of actually honing the product and really having a very honest view on what it is that you've created. Because when you create a product, the biggest danger is that it becomes your baby, right? You spend all this time and energy and money and effort on doing something, and then you fall in love with the thing that you've made. And the result of that oftentimes is that, it doesn't actually solve the problem. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So it's this kind of building / self-realization and creative destruction that happens all the way up until the point where you actually launch the product. That is, it's fantastic. It's exhilarating. It's painful. It's a lot of great, fast and sort of really powerful emotions.
Yeah, I'm sure it's an exciting time for you, and especially knowing that where you currently are at and what you've got ahead. Like you said, you put a lot of groundwork in. I think it's fair to say. and now it's time to get something really out there and start causing the change that you've hoped for the last couple of years, right? So yeah, I really appreciate the whole background of Meld and yourself as well, Ken. So thank you for that. And now I want to move on to some questions which are more Web3 focused, of course. The reason and your answers for these questions will be based on your experience with Meld. But yeah, I feel like you've got definitely a lot of value to share based on your journey. So it'd be great to get some
A lot of scars.
yeah, some stars. That's a good way to put it. Let's make that clear. It's not straightforward being in this industry, for sure. But yeah, so let's start with general question. What advice? Let's say 3 bits of advice that you'd give to someone who's looking to create a Web3 startup. And let's
Three
say
bits
that
of advice.
your stars. Yeah, 3 bits from your
So,
stars.
yeah. So the first is unhappiness. That's probably the most important. It doesn't have anything to do with Web3 at all. If when you're creating something, you have to be unhappy with the way it's currently done. Honestly unhappy, right? Frustrated, angry, pissed off, just, agitated, just generally unhappy about something. That's what's going to kind of drive you to be critical. It's what's going to drive you to sort of think more about it and sort of get into more details. So that would be the first thing, be very unhappy. The second I would say is use it. Use crypto. You would be incredibly surprised at how many people, how many founders, how many experts in Web3 have only really kind of scratched the surface. They've watched some YouTube videos, they've bought a bit of Bitcoin, they've, transferred, maybe they've supplied something to Uniswap, or they've added liquidity someplace. But I would say probably the number one enlightening component to, or enlightening advice to Web3 is use it, and use a lot of it. Go in there and lend and borrow and yield farm and, buy NFTs and mint NFTs and upgrade them and, use it, actually use it. Doesn't matter whether you spend a lot of money at it or not. You can sort of use blockchains that are a lot cheaper just to sort of learn the mechanics of it, but actually use it on a daily basis and get into the nitty gritty of the mechanics on how it works across the whole of the ecosystem. And I think if you do that, that'll give you an enormous amount of insight as to how to solve problems in a better way. It'll give you sort of ammunition to criticize the way that it currently is. That's probably my biggest advice is to actually do that. And then I would say that the third is to talk. It's a lot of Web3 leaders, a lot of Web3 founders come from the tech side, so they're not so keen on talking. They don't have a problem in sort of like tech forums, but like talking in situations like this, or talking as the founder of a company, or as the founder of a protocol, or as the person who has the vision. It's a muscle. The more you talk about it, the better you're going to be. The more you talk about it, the more you're going to put your foot in your mouth, and you're going to learn not to do that. The more you are out there and discussing it, the more you're going to attract people that are like-minded. The more you're going to have a dialogue with people, the more you're going to be able to sort of get known in the space. The more people are going to write about you, or sort of try to understand what you're doing, or, or hate you or whatever. But talk, be out there, discuss it. You have to get yourself known. You have to put yourself out. That is really kind of your skin in the game if you don't have a huge amount of money to invest. And so this is one of the things that we did. I made a point. It was painful. It sucked. It was hard. But when we started, I did between 1 and 2 Telegram AMAs every day, 5 days a week. And whenever anybody, it didn't matter. I think my first YouTube interview, the guy had like 120 followers or something. So in the beginning, like the first 3 months, I never said no to anybody. It didn't matter if you had one follower. I said no to no one. It was always, you want to do an interview with me? Want to talk to me about this? Yes, 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 yes. Be out there, be out there, be out there, be out there. And I made mistakes. I said stupid things. But, it's one of the things that's nice about Web3 is it's not as polished as other industries, and they don't expect you to be as polished. They expect there to be sort of a human component to it, which is kind of refreshing.
Sure. Look, three really, really good points. And yeah, I mean, it's clear that you do a lot of talking, Kevin, because you explained all 3 points very, very, very well. I don't think there's anyone that's just watched that will think, I don't know what he's going on about. So really appreciate that. If I was going to add 1 point to that while we're on the topic, I would say realize how early we are. I think,
Humility, absolutely.
right?
Humility, absolutely.
Okay. Well,
Totally agree.
we'll add that, but it's true in the sense that if you look at, you were speaking earlier about being involved or watching the .com era. Unfortunately, I'm clearly not quite old enough to have experienced it, um, but I think the core point is that there were so many amazing companies that came out the back of that, and they weren't the first companies to be built in the tech in the tech era. It was, some of them came later on, like Facebook, for example. Facebook wasn't the first social networking site. There was plenty
No.
before that just didn't hit it off and get it right and really create that winning formula. And I think we haven't seen the next Facebook of Web3. We haven't seen the next Google, Amazon, and so on of the Web3.
No, but Facebook and Google, they were not part of the .com, right? I mean, Google launched in 2000. So the .com was dead in March of 2000. It died a horrible, fiery death. So they got the best out of the .com world, right? The .com was like, whatever sort of etoys.com. I'm going to make a $1 billion company out of selling toys or selling dog food, or literally those were the sort of harebrained ideas. And so I think that you're right, very much so. We're very, very, very early days here, and we can think of the .com as the 2018 bubble or the 2018 sort of market, and then this might be sort of the equivalent after that of the kind of Facebook. But I still think that we're very, very, very early, because the difference between the two is the .com was trying to change the way we communicate, which there's no real people, there's no organization out in the world that manages how we communicate, right? Well, crypto is trying to change the way we calculate value. And there are thousands of organizations all over the world that monopolize that role. And so it's going to go slower than the .com, how the .com impacted with the internet, because there's going to be less friction than there is with cryptocurrency and, the jurisdictions and all the stuff you're seeing in the States and stuff like that right now.
Sure. No, I agree. There's a lot to be untold in this industry, and the next few years, to me, are probably the most exciting. I've been in and around where I would just know it's crypto, right, before Web3, but probably since 2000 and late 2016, 17, and technically that's quite a long time ago now. But realistically, I've never been more excited than I am now. Not just because I'm building in the space, but also because I see the possibilities, and the infrastructure is growing every day to enable new things to be done with the technology. So yeah, we really are just at the start. So that's good to establish that point, and hopefully people can realize they're definitely not too late to start building something. In fact, they're still extremely early, even if they go on to ChatGPT after this podcast and type in ideas for crypto businesses. You're not you can do that. So yeah, I mean, in terms of what you think the future looks like, I'd definitely be interested to get your thoughts on the future of DeFi, considering you're obviously playing or hoping to play a massive part in the future of DeFi. So let's start with that. What are your thoughts on the future of DeFi?
Thoughts on the future of DeFi. I think that DeFi is going to have a a difficult road over the coming 2 or 3 years. Not so much because of the technology or because of the industry, but because there's so many. DeFi and crypto in general is first an international citizen, and so it's struggling a lot with this, trying to relate to nationalities and nations, trying to control it under a kind of a traditional nation state kind of a model. That, in honesty, that's what the Bitcoin white paper is about trying to provide an alternative to that kind of nation state and traditional monetary policy kind of model. And so I think that DeFi is it's kind of the ball that's being tossed back and forth between these two different camps, and it's going to struggle for how it's going to relate to both of them. But I think that over time we'll see that things will settle down, and DeFi is definitely here to stay. It solves too big a problem for too many people, right? We're talking about billions and billions of people need this kind of a product. So it is here to stay, but how it relates to Western countries, how it relates to the superpowers, that I think is going to be very, very difficult. And if you're doing DeFi, if you're working in DeFi, part of your role is to have a pretty good understanding about macroeconomics and macroeconomic trends, because unless you're building kind of like a pure technology solution like the graph or something like that, what you're doing will either impact this back and forth between nation states and international, or it might actually change the balance of power. It might disrupt the narrative that's happening back and forth between there. So I consider it to be quite dangerous, because there's such high stakes. But at the same time, because it's so dangerous, there is so much room for just massive change and massive impact that can happen. And really, like you were saying, the sky is the limits right now. I mean, we're only scratching the surface on what actually can be done. And so as this matures, as people grow up in this and have more mature ideas around it, that will continue to change this kind of tug back and forth that's happening. And it's super exciting because you have normal people, just like everyday people, that because they're in Web3, they have a voice to change the conversation that is happening between, is money owned by me? Is money owned by a government? Do I have control over my money? Does my government have control over my money? Can my money move? Is the value, all of these very, very big, very powerful ideas are really at the core of Web3. You can do things like, whatever, decentralized Twitter and stuff like that. But really the sort of the big narrative there and the sort of underlying foundation has to do with, am I in control of my own money? And can I handle it based on my own discretion? Or is my money controlled by a government?
Sure, and I think you've kind of covered the question I had after, which is what excites you the most around blockchain technology. And I would assume that's probably the possibilities of DeFi. Please interrupt me if
No, I don't think so at all. No, I don't think so in the slightest. I think that there are much bigger plays to be made out there in DeFi. Is decentralized finance, right?
Sure.
But think about this, right? So when the internet started, in the early days, you had sort of DARPANET, and you had a couple of universities that sort of ran the network, and then the network became massively distributed, right? So you'd have, when I lived in Los Angeles and it was the age of the, internet service provider, there might have been 500 or 600 internet service providers in Los Angeles. Now there's maybe 4, 6. So you had this massive explosion of decentralization. And then as money came in, it became intensely highly centralized. And you're starting to see this as well. So you have Bitcoin that comes out and it gets massively decentralized. And then you start to see it very, 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 very centralized around a very small number of actors all over the world. But because the technology is so young and it's opened, that decentralization can take many, many different forms. And I think that that's what makes it really exciting. So you can have decentralized democracy. You can have, decentralized infrastructure. What happens if, somebody makes a piece of hardware that you can stick, on top of your TV, kind of like a PS4 or a PS5, and that replaces Amazon AWS, Amazon Web Services? It becomes decentralized infrastructure. It has huge upsides, right? It's got a security upside because the infrastructure then can't be sort of tampered with at specific data centers. But it has a downside because you're then competing against, Amazon and their sort of, whatever, 100 different tentacles into 100 different businesses. So I think that money is a key part of it, but really the sky's the limit as to where, once you really understand what the power of decentralization is, you can turn that into a lot of different things. Think about it, something super, super simple. Like in Europe, you right now have, over the winter, you had all kinds of these energy crises. What happens if every single roof has solar panels on it? Then the entirety of the energy in Europe has been decentralized. And that's a fundamental, it's a sea change, right? And so, no, I think that money is a big part of it. It's the foundation, but there's so much more that can be done.
I'd agree. I think of problems that I experience every day, and now my mind is set to think straight away, can this be solved with Web3 and everything that comes with Web3, like you mentioned, decentralization. But yeah, I think I want to finish on one question that I personally want to know the answer to. So we're going to run with it. So what do you think makes a great Web3 company? Because right now you're talking about some fantastic opportunities for Web3, but we all know that in the majority of cases, they're going to be businesses and they need to be ran well in order to achieve, these huge revolution and change. So in your opinion, what do these good companies need?
For a Web3 company, I would say that there's two components that are absolutely critical, and then there's one component that is critical and probably the Achilles heel of Web3. So the two first components are having absolutely just blow the doors off good marketing and design and communication. That is going to afford you so much more exposure and so much bigger community at a much, much lower cost than you would otherwise have to do. Which ties into the sort of second part, which is really, really solid tech. So if you have very bad marketing and very bad or very middle of the road, run of the mill marketing and design and communications, then your entire business is going to rely on the tech and rely on whether people actually find that tech compelling and exciting, or if there's a market that are enough adopters out there that kind of see that vision. And so you can actually augment the tech spend initially by having fantastic marketing and communications and being able to get the word out and sort of talk to the community. But once you've done that and you've built that up, then it really comes down to having solid tech that's not big. It doesn't mean you have, 100 engineers. It means you have really good, level-headed, clever, thoughtful, like well-rounded tech that can kind of deliver on the promise and that can be humble enough to evolve and expand and include various different perspectives. So I think those are the two sort of positives, two things that I think are critical. And the third one I think is critical, but I think it's also the most damaging. and that is the cult of personality. I think what I see in Web3, which is very scary, is that most successful Web3 projects revolve around a person, me, Vitalik, or whoever. There is this cult of personality in Web3, which you see in a lot of projects. And it's great in the beginning because it means that all eyes can be focused on a single vision, a single idea, a single point of contact. It's very convenient. But ultimately, we know that that cult of personality ends at some point, and then it calls into question whether there's enough longevity or there's enough kind of solid foundation in the organization to continue to move at the same speed and the same power. And so, well, I think that unfortunately this cult of personality is a key component of Web3 and the community driven side of it. I think it's also probably the most dangerous part of it, where both that personality can drive the business in the wrong direction because they have too much power, or they can sort of get high on their own vision and become very diluted. Or there's just a lot of potential pitfalls for this kind of personality centered business. I think that's quite dangerous, and I think it's much healthier if you can manage to build an organization around an idea, a vision, a visual language, a set of values, than it is to build it around a person.
Fantastic. Again, really, really interesting answers to the question. It wasn't the general, have good cost management and hire good people, and the general like preaching aspects, which again are important. But I really like your take and your unique approach to the questions again. So thank you very much for joining us. I've personally really enjoyed it. I think there's a ton of value in this episode. So really, really appreciate it. So yeah, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Jake. I appreciate it.
No worries at all. And just one final point. Thank you for everyone for watching this episode of the Uppercent Web3 School. As I kind of mentioned at the start of the episode, Uppercent, we're trying to use Web3 technology to revolutionize the e-learning space. You can buy, own, and sell exclusive access passes to cinema quality online courses taught by the Uppercent. In other words, the top 1% of people. So yeah, that's my part. If you are interested by that, check it out. Visit uppercent.com. If not, then no worries. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And once again, thanks for joining, Ken. And I guess we'll see you all on the next one.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.